So the trailer for the new live-action Moana just dropped, and it's being absolutely destroyed by the internet. People are calling it lifeless, unnecessary, and comparing it to AI slop. And honestly, I get it. This trailer doesn't exactly scream quality, but if you think that the problem is just the visuals or Maui's lack of nipples, then you're missing the bigger picture. With each one of these remakes, it's starting to look like Disney either doesn't remember or straight up doesn't care about why people loved the originals in the first place. Just look at what they did to Lilo and Stitch. They cut Gantu out, they made Jumbo the main villain, and they changed Nani's character in more ways than I have time to mention. And these things didn't just change the plot, they changed the whole meaning of the film. They took a heartwarming and nuanced story about found family and turned it into a generic kids movie with mixed messaging, to say the least. You know, they say if it ain't broke, don't fix it, but what's it called when you don't even try? And what makes it worse is that they were rewarded for it. It grossed over $1 billion in the box office. But it wasn't always like this. Back when Disney started this live action trend, it felt like they were actually trying to reimagine these stories. Think back to 2015 with Kenneth Branagh's Cinderella. To this day, people look at it as the gold standard for these remakes because it didn't just copy the cartoon. It was unique while also taking just enough from the original to feel right. The characters became three-dimensional, the attention to costumes and scenery brought the whole world to life, and you could genuinely feel that back then, Disney felt a real pressure to do the story justice. They understood that this was a fairy tale first and IP second, but most importantly, they understood that you can't just translate animation directly. You see, I'm a firm believer that animation is a completely different storytelling language, with tools that live action simply doesn't have access to. You can exaggerate movement, stretch proportions, bend physics, you know, the list goes on. And Maui is a huge example of that. Literally, he's massive. The animals he shapeshifts into somehow keep his face, and the magical tattoos move and interact with him. His personality is really baked into his design and movement, and it works really well. But here we have a 53-year-old Dwayne Johnson in a stiff-ass muscle suit and quite possibly the most unconvincing wig I've ever seen. It genuinely reminds me of the infamous Iron Man floating head phenomenon, and what makes it even crazier is where Johnson is at career-wise. He's coming off The Smashing Machine, which was supposed to be this like huge pivot into serious acting, and honestly I thought he did a great job in the movie and I was genuinely impressed by his performance. But now, immediately after that, he's back to playing a cartoon demigod, and I can't help but notice that he looks dead inside, like somebody go help this man. But the more I look at it, the more I think it highlights the exact problem this movie is dealing with. You know, outside of the fact that it looks like AI, it's very clearly failing to find that balance between live action and animated storytelling. You know, the shots where it's just people talking versus the fully CGI ones look like two completely different movies, with one of them looking significantly worse. I mean, just look at how static and flat these dialogue shots look compared to any of the ones where the CGI takes over. It's doing the opposite of what Cinderella did and going for a one-for-one remake instead of taking the heart of the story and bringing that into live action. And that's not to say you have to completely flip the script for it to be good. Just look at the How to Train Your Dragon remake. That movie is essentially a beat-for-beat remake of the original, and it was pretty solid. It obviously had the advantage of having the same director and some of the same cast, but at the end of the day, they made sure that the parts of the movie that mattered most stayed intact. But that same strategy could also backfire like it did with The Lion King. You know, that movie looked incredible on a technical level, but that realism stripped away the character's ability to express emotions because, well, they're fucking animals, man. And now apply that to Moana and the same problem becomes even more obvious because it doesn't just rely on expressive characters and animals, but an expressive world. But it's not all doom and gloom. You guys know I'm a huge sucker for musical numbers, and this film is being directed by Thomas Kail, who is the director behind the Broadway productions of In the Heights and Hamilton, which are both amazing.
If I can prove that I never touched my...
If there's just one thing I can't help but think every time we get one of these movies, it's just how I wish Disney would go back to making remakes, not just with more heart, but just straight up original live action movies. I recently found The Sorcerer's Apprentice while thrifting, and this movie is low-key a banger. It's not without its flaws, of course, but they managed to take a bit of classic Disney, a bit of medieval fantasy, and combine it into this iconic movie that feels like the perfect snapshot of 2010. Movies like National Treasure, The Haunted Mansion, Sky High, and even Jungle Cruise all felt like they weren't solely relying on IP and branding to sell tickets. And at the end of the day, I am a grown man complaining about a movie for kids, like I get it, but I just loved the original, and one day, you know, when I have kids, if the world's still spinning, I want them to have their own original iconic movies, not just washed out copies of my childhood. So if you enjoyed this little rant, check out my review of last year's Lilo and Stitch remake and subscribe for more reviews. I'll see you guys soon.